And good evening, live from the Civic Center on South 3rd Street here in Bardstown. PLG and the Kentucky Standard, happy to be presenting another in our series of political debates. And tonight we're going to be featuring a pair of debates. First one will feature the two Democratic candidates who are running for the 50th District State Representative seat. And then our next debate, which will start around 7:15, will feature the three Democratic candidates for jail. And that includes incumbent Dorcas Figg and a couple of challengers, Michael Johnson and John Bonasnelli. I want to acknowledge and thank some folks, Wilson and Mearbank, for making our coverage possible, underwriters of the debates, folks at Mr. Music for their technical support, City of Bardstown end of the cable guys, as we like to call it. They are helping to put this program on, getting it onto the cable. Our crew includes John White, Matt Gordon, Scott Cederholm, who will be taking care of the timing chores for us. Also, Dennis George has joined us, who will be doing a Kentucky Standard piece. And of course, our own Jamie Sizemore, the publisher. Joining me, as we have for the last several nights, we've got the editor of the Kentucky Standard, Forrest Hookshire, and reporter Randy Patrick. And as we said tonight, our attention goes to the 50th State Representative race. James DeWeese and Corey Miller are the two candidates. Backstage, we already have a coin flip, and it has been determined that James will be doing our opening statement, which will be about 3 minutes, give or take, and followed by Corey. Then at the close of our debate, about an hour from now, it will be Corey Miller, and then James will be doing the second closing statement. Those statements also will be about 3 minutes. The candidates will have 2 minutes to address questions posed by Forrest and by Randy, and in some cases maybe me. I have jumped in on occasion. And if they do want to rebut something that perhaps their opponent has said during a statement, all they have to do is throw up the hand, and that will get them an extra minute for clarification or for rebuttal. And yes, there can be a rebuttal to a rebuttal. That's happened several times here. So we try to be as flexible as we can about this, but we also want to try to control the pace. So with all that said, let's go to our opening statement and James DeWeese.
All right, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Kentucky Standard, PLG, and all the organizers who have organized tonight's events, along with the Nelson County Gazette and WBRT for assisting in the coverage of this forum. Hello Nelson County. My name is James DeWeese, and I'm running to be your state representative. I'm running because I want to make government work for working families. A little bit about myself. I have the most wonderful wife down there, Christy Higgins DeWeese, who is also a lifelong resident here in Nelson County. We met while working at UPS many years ago, and together we have two small children. We have Sydney, who's 7, and Mason, who's 4, and they attend the local public schools out here. And you'll see this is why public education is very important to our family. I currently work at Teamsters Local 89 as a business agent. I represent workers there at the UPS facilities here in the state in southern Indiana. And since I was 19 years old, I started there when I was 18, but when I was 19 years old, I became an advocate for working families. In the functions of that job, in my responsibilities, I fight for good wages, affordable health care, retirement security, and to make sure people have good working conditions and a safe and respectful place to work. As your state representative, I will stand up for Nelson County against the attacks on working families that they have faced over the past 2 years of our legislature. In the past 2 short years, we have seen attacks against the paychecks on working families with the repeal of prevailing wages and the right to work laws. We've seen attacks on teachers and public workers, attacks on our public education system, attacks on the pocketbooks of working families through an unfair tax increases that only favored the wealthy. We've seen bills passed where the legislators We're not allowed to read the bills. We've seen our fellow citizens locked out of meetings at the Capitol, and we've seen our transparency neglected. Folks, this is why I'm running to be your state representative. I will work to make government work for working families. Thank you.
All right, the opening statement from James Luis, and now over to Corey Miller.
Hello, my name is Corey Miller. I'm running to be your next state representative. I'd first like to thank all the sponsors of tonight's event, PLG 13, Kentucky Standard, Vuzix, City of Bardstown, and Wilson Mirror Bank. I really appreciate their time in setting this all up. A little bit about myself. I'm a project engineer, so I go into failing companies all around the world, mainly Fortune 500 companies, and I fix manufacturing problems for them. I have HR problems, engineering, can vary day to day. I handle hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. I've spent billions in my life over the past 12 years, and I have great results from my work. But enough of me. In today's America, we are struggling with our current system of government, and it's massively failing us across the board. We grew up in a system of patriotism and freedom for all. Now we live in a country of mass incarceration and unemployment, a failing healthcare system due to greed and graft at every level. In today's society, people only care about themselves and how something personally affects them. We have lost our compassion for our fellow man. We have forgotten e pluribus unum, out of one we are many, or out of many we are one. We have let greed and graft divide us, but no more. We must stand united as one party in one country to say, no, I will not tolerate injustice towards others. No, I will not settle for status quo. We deserve progress and compassion towards our fellow man. We choose to live free together as one people again. We need politicians who are just and who is just an ordinary man with common sense and plain everyday common courtesy towards his fellow man. Not an individual who has personal interests or is there to profit off of the suffering of others. We need legislators in office who have been affected by corrupt legislation aimed at putting others down. I've always lived my life by the philosophy noblesse oblige, French for nobility's obligation. It means that to be noble, one must prove it by their actions and deeds. To put others before oneself, to be kind, gracious, thoughtful for others, to defend the weak and oppressed, and by living not to take, but to give. For that is the supreme obligation of those who have the power, knowledge, means, and prestige to make a difference. I am not here to brag about me tonight, because tonight is about me. Tonight is about all of you. I need to prove to you that I can be there to protect each and every one of your interests, no matter how big or small. I'm just an ordinary person who is also struggling just like you, so I understand the reality of the situation and know we need immediate change. So instead of hoping things would change, like many others, I decided that I'll start the change by running this election myself. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. And the bell means 30 seconds to go. And I think I fairly mentioned that at the outset. And Scott Cederholm is really doing a great job on that. Bit of housekeeping on my part. I failed to mention Patrick being also part of our crew, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Okay, well, now it's time to go to the questions, and we'll be alternating those between Forrest and Randy, and we'll let Forrest lead things up.
And Corey, you will answer this first question first.
Sure.
I understand that you've already addressed this somewhat in your opening statements, but if you could, can you explain to us why are you running for state representative, and why would you be the best person to represent Nelson County in Frankfort?
Sure. Well, the reason I'm running is honestly because I believe I can help people. I've watched so much corruption go on in Frankfort. We're ranked 46th most corrupt in the United States. I mean, that's just horrific. There's so much greed and graft in Frankfort that you have to get control of it. I know James and myself are both good candidates, and we'll both serve equally as good in Frankfort and support each other. So I'm not worried about that one whatsoever. But the reason why I think I would make a good state representative is because I've been a project engineer. I've handled hundreds of millions of dollars. I've managed multiple different companies all over the world, some of them in 3 or 4 different languages. And you have to, talk to each one of those groups and understand what their needs are. But not only that, but I have planning and zoning experience in Hardin County. I have experience with the Department of Commerce when I worked for them. And I've also worked on many different contract projects for military and other things. So I have a very broad knowledge of training. So I think that's what really matters. And not only that, but I've been a lobbyist since 2005. I've helped with multiple different groups. Senator Neal was one of my professors in college. Multiple different senators have been my professors in college. And not only that, but working with the Kentucky Out of School Alliance and various other groups, I've learned to write legislation with these guys and actually know how laws are written. I brought with me today a manual to write a bill. Most people their first year don't do anything. They have resolutions or they'll co-sign a bill. I've read these manuals all my life. I've written the bills for these congressmen and I understand the law. Most people their first year do not accomplish anything. I think Chad McCoy had 34 different resolutions and 24 co-sponsored bills his first year.
That sounds like there's the gong.
Oh, sorry.
We'll be getting back to the topics, I'm sure. James?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. The reason what would make me a good legislator and a representative for Nelson County is the fact that I care. And I truly care about people, and I care about our issues and our problems. That is what has propelled me in my professional career with labor. I became a representative at a very early age. I've represented people my whole adult life. And since I was 19 years old, in fact, when I became a shop floor leader. And that has been propelled because I truly love and care people, and I want to see the best for them. I'm a leader. That's what I do. I'm a leader of thousands of people through the state. I've been to Frankfurt many times, pushing for legislation that affects working families or protesting it or what have you. I have a lot of experience in that, and I know a lot of people in Frankfurt. I'm not a lobbyist, but I've worked hand in hand with lobbyists. But the fact is that as your state representative, I will represent you well, represent the working people here to make sure that we get the fair shake that we deserve. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll shift over to Randy Pepper.
Okay, and James, you'll answer this one first.
Yes.
It's been said that Kentucky Democrats are different from the National Party. Are you a different kind of Democrat than the National Democrats? And how are you different from your opponent, Mr. Miller? How would you label yourself politically?
Well, I am a Democrat, and I do think that Democrats here in Kentucky, and particularly Nelson County, are different. The values I represent, I feel that represent ours in Nelson County. There's a lot of things that I agree with my party, but there are a few things I don't. I am a supporter of Second Amendment gun rights. I am pro-life. I think that's unique in this area compared to other areas. I meet Democrats all the time out here that share those two values. I know that me and my opponent have talked in generalized terms on a number of subjects, and we agree on many of them. I believe, and he can correct me if I'm wrong later, but I believe that you are pro-choice, and but there's a lot of things that we do agree on, and I don't think that's bad either. We all have our own opinions and what our differences are, but I do believe that Kentucky does have its own unique Democrat, and I feel like I'm representative of the values of the working class folks. Thank you.
And Corey?
Yes, sir. Well, personally, I don't believe the party system works. I do consider myself a Democrat, but I consider myself an American first, and I think that's what's important. Our founding fathers only created the party system out of one vote. They were very divided on it. I think that's the one thing that divides us most in this country today. There's so much more that we could be accomplishing if we didn't have the party system that divides us today. Well, just my opponents alone, last election cycle, I mean, the amount of money that they each spent, it was just astronomical, the amount of waste that goes into electing people. We could be doing so much more with that money. But I wouldn't say I'm necessarily pro-choice, but I am pro. I think everybody's pro-life. I don't see how anybody can't be pro-life. But at the same time, I respect individuals' rights, and I think that's what America is founded on. And often what most people forget about is that religious freedoms do not outtrump personal rights. And I can respect somebody's personal right. But I do differ from the national level, but as far as the Democrats go, but I think Nelson County Democrats are a type of a breed altogether of themselves, because we're more of a blue dog Democrat area. People here vote for the individual, not the party. And I think that's more representation of how I actually vote, is actually go out into the community, meet with all the groups, and speak with them. You know, I've been to almost every site-based meeting here. I've been to Hearing Loss Association, Kentucky Lyme Disease Association, opioid addiction. You know, I've gone to every single event in town because I do care and I want to hear, and I've learned something at each one of them that gives me a different perspective than the party. Because the party's values don't always align with the local areas. You know, we're a bourbon industry. At one time, bourbon was thought poorly of for making. But now, you know, it's considered an amazing industry. It employs tens of thousands of people across the globe. And, you know, it's one of our main products here, and we have to protect it. Thank you.
Okay, opposed?
School safety is a matter of great concern because of the fatal shootings in Marshall County High School here in Kentucky, as well as in many other states, including Florida earlier this year. What can the legislature do to protect students and school employees from mass shootings? And Corey, I would ask you to answer this first.
Sure. I appreciate you asking. It's a really good question. You know, school safety is an important topic, especially with everything that's been going on here lately. But personally, I believe we need to get down to the real reason why these shootings are happening. You know, is it a socioeconomic issue? Are people struggling and they're pushing all that stress onto their children? Or is it more that the kids being fooled? You know, Kentucky has an extremely high suicide rate for middle school students. You know, that's unacceptable, especially for, you know, those that are being bullied. But what we could do to counter it, you know, we could create exploratory groups to look at engineering ways to strengthen buildings, to have it to where it detects explosives and then automatically alerts police departments to come on site. But to put a police officer in each building, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. I'm not saying it's not a critical thing, but we need to be looking at alternative ways to look at defending our children. You know, I'd like to put more teachers in the classrooms, you know, have more resources for them to where they can work individually with each student and determine, you know, if there's a mental illness or if they're struggling for personal issues at home. You know, that's the kind of things we need to get to. We need to get back to a personal one-on-one with the kid and actually figure out why they're you know, they're committing these crimes, you know, because often it doesn't even make sense why they're committing them. So we need to get to the real problems. But we could be looking at you know, teacher safety in the classroom, as far as like door stops and different things like that. You know, I personally don't believe that we need to arm our teachers, because we shouldn't be teaching our students to respond to violence with violence. You know, that's not what a teacher should be doing, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Corey as well. James, your take on this?
Yeah, there are a number of devices that can be attached to doors. I think that would be low cost and very effective in allowing the teachers to lock themselves and the children in the room to mitigate the damage that could be caused by an active shooter. I am not, for one, I'm never going to support a teacher being armed. I disagree with that philosophy myself. But looking at it on a personal level, we need to fund our educational system much better. The children know who the teachers know who the children who need some special attention are. We need to give a lot more resources to our educational system to help these counselors get these children the help that they need before this even occurs. In addition to that, on the home front, there's a lot of problems with parents not having access to affordable health care for their own children. When they start seeing their children needing some additional help, they simply don't have the insurance. And those are things that the legislature can help on. And I'll also support any type of collaboration with our local departments on possible resource officers or any type of collaboration with our local officers to help with that situation as well.
Yes, Corey?
Yes, I completely agree with James. That's, there's not going to be a lot of debate here tonight because we agree so much, but I completely agree that we need to work with law enforcement in the area to maybe adopt a school at police to where they show up randomly in different schools around the county. I think we have 14 county schools and then, of course, the city schools in Bardstown. But that is something that is low cost that they could do on, days that they have paperwork and things like that. But also, under Section 183 of the General Assembly, we're required to provide for our school systems. We need to honor that promise. That is on the books as a law, and we need to go back to that and actually honor that. It's like a police officer. They're responsible for all the laws on the book, whether they agree with them or not. Why aren't the legislators? Why aren't we honoring this law? And we need to get back to that. We need to hold ourselves accountable and get back to being on the correct committees to make this stuff happen. That's one thing about Chad McCoy is that he's not on tourism. He's not on things that actually benefit this county. And that's what's important to us. If you want to drive legislation in Frankfort, you have to be on the correct committees. If you're not on the correct committees, you're not going to get legislation passed. Unless you have connections on that committee or, you're working on another bill or somebody has connections on that committee. But that's how Frankfort's, driven.
Okay, let's reset the clock, and James DeWeese wanted to do a clarification or an elaboration, perhaps.
I'd like to elaborate on what my opponent is saying here about, the legislator is required to fund our schools, but they haven't done that in a long time. They fund at bare minimum. So if you look at the amount that they've been funded, they're behind, over a decade in increasing funding for these schools. We need more money put into the school system. Absolutely. And I think that's a component of it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, Randy Patrick.
All right, switching to public health, Kentucky lags nearly every other state in public health, and smoking is one reason. This past session, lawmakers passed a 50-cent per pack cigarette tax, which they say will help fund education. But experts say to really reduce smoking rates, it should have been at least $1. Do you support the current 50-cent tax, and would you support raising it more?
Who's first?
You'll be first.
Okay. Yeah, of course I support raising the tobacco tax. We're behind every other state in the country on that. I'd honestly be willing to go as high as $2 on that issue. But that all comes down to debate and committees and stuff like that. Now, on your question now, if you can clarify a little bit, are you wanting to know more like medical situations that or medical programs that we can work on in the state, or are you more worried about the tobacco part of that question?
The tobacco part, just are you in favor of raising the cigarette tax in order to be able to provide more money for education?
Sure, but that's
And discourage smoking, that's another part of it.
okay. Yeah, it's been proven that, increasing the cost of cigarette packs discourages smoking. That's a given. Which does increase with the health risk and stuff like that. But to help fund education, I don't think that's the only thing that we need to be working on. We need to be looking at resolutions in the House and Senate. We need to be removing those because it costs us $1 million a day in the General Assembly to actually run the General Assembly. That's all the staff there, and a lot of those guys are there for 15, 20 hours sometimes per day. And during even years, if they go for 60 days and 30 days and odd years. And all that resolution is a politician drumming up support for his own district. It doesn't accomplish anything. You know, we shouldn't be wasting our time honoring local basketball teams when that money could be, you know, it's estimated that they're wasting $400,000 a day just on resolutions alone. If we remove that, 400,000 times 60 days, that's a lot of money. You know, and there's tons of waste all across the board with that. And that's just one situation. I mean, we have to be looking at more revenue sources than just tobacco. You know, granted, we are behind on tobacco taxes, but there's literally tons of other programs that we need to be looking at to save more money.
James, cigarette tax.
I'm against that tax. And for those that know me, know that I've never smoked a cigarette a day in my life, and when I get around this, the smoke of a cigarette, it sends me into a coughing convulsion that takes a while to get over, and I just really don't like cigarettes. But I don't like that tax because that's a tax on the working poor, and it's also a fading tax. It's going to fade over time as smoking rates reduce, and that's not how we fund education. There's so many other things that we should have done, or the legislators should have done, to fix the educational funding and the funding for the pensions. In fact, if you look at all the tax increases that they put on working families, they were all geared toward the working poor and working families. We have the cigarette tax. We have a tax on the opiates. We want to get rid of those. Why are we trying to fund our system through that? We have taxes on auto repair, veterinary bills. You know, those are taxes on working poor, and that was the approach the legislator took. Sometimes I think that maybe they just picked out a few things where there wasn't a lot of lobbyists on those industries. So I was against it based off those issues. You know, I'd like to see smoking decrease throughout the state too. But that's not the way you fund education or any other program. I just disagree with that. Thank you.
Okay, Corey, you wanted to elaborate?
Yeah.
We will be talking about other taxes later on in the
Okay.
debate, but Corey, you wanted to get an extra 60 seconds?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, James is absolutely right. We're not going to pay for education with tax money. That's just an extra temporary revenue source for the state. We actually have to create permanent, long-term revenue sources for education. The education should never be cut. Education is the top priority in the state. It should always be our #1 top priority because that is our youth, that's our future. And the world is drastically changing. You know, when I hire people, I've hired thousands of people all over the world, and I no longer need just a welder. What I need now is multiple people with multiple different skill sets. You know, I need somebody that knows pneumatics, hydraulics, welding, electrical, plumbing. You know, I need one guy that can do everything. And I work in both union and non-union shops all over the world. Both are very beneficial, you know, both produce a great product, but at the end of the day, it comes down to education. You know, if the person isn't qualified, I have to personally train them or send them out to be trained. That way they can accomplish their jobs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And,
Forrest.
and James, I know you just touched on this, and I'm going to ask you to answer this question first. Republicans established new taxes on some services, as you mentioned, and cut some personal income and corporate taxes. Do you support those tax cuts, and do you support the taxes on services?
Well, I do not support the tax bill that was put forth by the legislature for a number of reasons. For one, I don't support a flat tax, and there's a reason, because the poorest and the most less fortunate of the community tends to pay that bill typically when those types of taxes are passed. But when you look at the tax structure overall that they put forth with the sales, or the service taxes that they put on a number of items, like the veterinary bills, the auto repair, the golf courses, landscaping, you know, those are taxes on working families, and I'm against that. Overall, if you make $175,000 or less, you received a tax increase, while the folks at the upper end of that amount received a tax decrease. And that's not right, and that's unfair. That's absolutely unfair. People are barely getting by right now, and they're struggling. You know, you got mom and dad out there working each a job, sometimes 2 jobs each. relying on daycare, relying on extended family members to help out, and now we're going to give them a tax increase? That's wrong, and I'll stand against that any day. Thank you.
Okay, Greg?
Yeah, I'm 100% with James on this one. I couldn't agree more on everything. We should never be taxing our poor to pay the difference for politicians' mistakes. The state has so much money out there that we misuse. You know, if we take a look at our transportation department and your contracts that contractors bid on, one company will come in there and outbid everybody, maybe have 100 police, and can't get any of the work done. Why aren't we finding those companies when they can't get that work done, taking away their contract, getting our bond money back, and then finding them for the bills, you know? Let's get back our money and hire somebody that can actually do the work. You know, then we can also be looking at banning petroleum in the state, or petroleum plastic. We could be switching to a cornstarch-based product to where it increases our agriculture in the county. You know, corn is a major agriculture or crop in this county. Why aren't we utilizing that? You know, let's create industries specifically to Kentucky. We shouldn't be having to import oil-based products to create it. You know, we can also be looking at taking sugar and CO2. So we can capture CO2 from the atmosphere and turn it into a new type of plastic as well. You know, and then that way it helps the federal level out with meeting the Paris the climate agreement. So it's a win-win there, because not only that, but CO2 can be used in carbonated drinks. CO2 can be used as fertilizer. You know, it can be used to make plastic. It has many different possibilities. You know, it can be used for CO2 canisters. I mean, it's just endless. But, I mean, we should be looking at, you know, switching to Kentucky Proud Food in our schools. You know, right now, our jails and schools only purchase 10% Kentucky Proud Food, and it generates $25 million worth of revenue for every 10%. Why isn't that number at 70 to 80%? You know, these are the things that we should be looking at to increase revenue in the state, not taxing the poor and people struggling. You know, let's hold companies accountable for what they're doing in the community. If they're making money here, they should be taxed. You know, this is unacceptable. You do not bring business here and then give them tax deals. That does not work. It's never worked. And, you know, personally, I want to get rid of at will, because at will is one of the greatest things this state has going against it. I cannot bring in corporate headquarters because we do not have the infrastructure in place for stuff like that. Thank you.
Okay. James, you wanted an extra minute.
I have a little bit different approach to the budgetary concerns that we have, but I think that my opponent will agree on me when I say it. When the legislatures went to tackle the biennium budget, some of the things that they had, or they failed to do, was increase our revenue with new revenue. And that's what should have been done all along. You know, we should have closed these tax loopholes that only the wealthy enjoy, rather than put the burden on the working folks. A couple other things that we should have looked at too. We should have looked at legalized gambling. And we should have looked at legalized gambling, and that would have brought in a lot of new revenue, and also medical marijuana. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave that where it is and go back to Randy Patrick.
All right. This is kind of along the same point, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit. And Corey, you'll answer this one first, if you will. As you mentioned, Kentucky is struggling to bring in enough revenue to balance its budget. Going forward, how should the legislature either raise revenue or reduce the budget paid for services? Or both?
What is revenue and what?
In either raise revenue or reduce the budget in other areas to pay for needed services, or do both?
Well, like I said, there's so much waste in this state that if we just hold ourselves accountable for what we actually spend. You know, some of our legislators are getting a $158,000 a year pension. I mean, I don't know anybody that has a part-time job that makes $158,000 a year in a pension. I don't know if you do, but if you do, find out, and I'll work there. But no, I want to do away with legislators, and actually all elected officials having a pension. You know, in my opinion, it should be an honor to be in that position. Maybe increase their pay. They're not paid very much. It's like $16,000 to $21,000, something like that. They're paid off of per diem. It's like $100-something a day. So they don't make a whole lot of money. And the work that they do is vital. So I do think it needs to be compensated properly for that. But no, I mean, we could be looking, like I said, Kentucky Proud Food, that's 25 million for every 10% right there. Get rid of resolutions in the House and Senate floor. That's $400,000 a day right there. So 400,000 times 60 right there, or 30, depending on if it's even or odd here. We should be taxing our automation. Taxing automation is huge because one of the number one things I do is automate factories. I was in a plant not too long ago and I replaced 300 workers with one robot. You hate doing that because, you can't morally it's hard to morally justify that with yourself, but you understand it because it's from a business point of view. But when you start cutting 1 or 2 jobs, 5, 10, it might be a little bit easier, but you still trying to find them places to work in the plant. But when you cut 200 or 300 people with one robot, how can you find 300 positions to replace them with at a company?
James?
Yes, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on what I'd said earlier. I felt that the approach should have been to raise revenue in some new industries rather than put it back on working families. We should have again closed some of the tax loopholes on some of the more wealthier people in the state. We should have legalized gambling, and we should legalize medical marijuana as well. When with our dollars going over across the bridge over to Harris Casino, we need to keep that money here. It's pure and simple. Our money's going over there, and that county's reaping the rewards of it. And when you go over there, and I know a little bit about it because the local I work for represents a lot of the members over there, and those folks make great money. They've got great benefits. They've got job security, and those are good jobs that could be right here in our state, along with the tax revenue to help support the stuff. In addition to that, when you look at medical marijuana, can be a completely new industry for our farmers. Now, we have a large agricultural base here in Nelson County, and I've spoke to a lot of farmers. I have farmers in my own family who talk to me about it all the time. It was a difficult subject for me to come around to, but I understand that we shouldn't be withholding this product from those that are sick and those that need this. But in addition to that, when you look at what it can bring even to our community, it could be overwhelming. We have a ticking time bomb going on right now with our farming community where a lot of the farmers are older. They're 55 and 60 years old. The children aren't wanting to come and take over the family farm. And this could be a complete new industry to help save the family farms as well. So we can solve a lot of our budgetary concerns with those 3 items there. Thank you.
Okay, Corey, you wanted to get in an extra 60 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, I 100% agree on marijuana with James. It's a $110 billion industry for North America. North America, both Canada and the United States, produce 40% of their own use of marijuana. And out of that 40%, Kentucky grows 80% of the United States use. Most of that is grown in Daniel Boone National Forest. If we're producing 80% of marijuana in the United States anyway, why aren't we taxing it? If you can't control something, you tax it. That's how you get control of it. And then you regulate it. There's 15 other states that are have marijuana legalized. And then now the federal government is looking at decriminalizing it overall. Now I do different a little bit with James on gambling, only because studies have shown that it typically only brings lower paying jobs into communities, $8, $9 an hour jobs, and it typically causes more people to commit crimes and stuff like that because they can't get by off those lower paying jobs. But at that same time, their higher paying jobs, their dealers and stuff like that, they're all from out of state and they rotate them because they don't want them to steal at the tables. So a lot of those guys come from Vegas and different ones like that across the country.
Okay, James, you wanted to go ahead.
One thing on the casinos that is incorrect, actually out in the crowd is a good friend of mine who represents Harris Casino, and those folks make a whole lot more money than that. They're unionized, they've got great benefits, they make enough to support their family. They're good union jobs. But when we think about casino gambling, let's just imagine Eastern Kentucky. If we had medical marijuana, like my opponents had mentioned, so much growing there, what, as beautiful it is in Eastern Kentucky, can you imagine a couple casinos being there? And how that could be a new diverse industry to help Eastern Kentucky out with loss of coal jobs.
Okay.
I'd like to rebuttal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
And I agree with James on a certain point to that on gambling. Each place is different. Not all places are unionized. I've actually built a couple casinos, so I understand that. But I think that the negative approach doesn't outweigh the benefit, because there's other revenue sources in this state. And I understand, I personally enjoy gambling, just like hopefully the next guy, but I just don't think we should be encouraging to create debt in our society. You know, one of the things I want to do is with banking regulations, I want to do away with banks being able to have overdrafts on people's accounts. Because if you think about it, somebody's making $300 a week, and the wife goes out and goes to 3 different places, spends $150, and then gets hit with 3 different overdraft fees for $50 each, because the company that they work for didn't process their payroll check on time. So how are they ever going to get out of debt? And then they go into money advance places, and it starts all over again.
James, you wanted to go further.
Yes, yeah, I'll be real quick. You know, for one, I'm not a gambler. I do support the industry for what it can do. Those dollars are already going over into Kentucky. You know, there are some issues there where people have the excessive gambling habits, but that's happening anyway. It's happening online. People are traveling just right across the bridge anyway. You know, with that new revenue, you know, also comes with dollars where you can help people out with that, just like they've done in Indiana with gambling addiction.
Corey wants 30 seconds.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I just personally don't think that the benefit, or we need to be creating debt in our society. We have to try to alleviate debt. And I understand people are going to try doing it anyway, but, you know, at least have to attempt to do the right thing, because people are going to be, you know, you have to protect people in the end, because Kentucky doesn't have a lot of money overall. You know, we don't make more money here than other states for jobs. So, you know, you just have to look out for them. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Forrest, I almost thought you had gone to sleep over here, Forrest.
I'm just itching to ask a question. It's the German. We've already touched on this a little bit. James, I'll go ahead and let you answer this first. A bill to legalize marijuana for medical purposes ended up on the cutting room floor this year in Frankfurt. Would you be in favor of trying to do it again to pass it? Or would you go further and also support making recreational pot legal?
Well, like I've said before, this has been a difficult subject for me to take on. And, you know, I've always been against it and looked at it as a gateway drug. Medical marijuana, as much as I've looked into it the past few years, I think it does have a benefit, not only for tax purposes and for economic purposes, but on a personal standpoint. You know, when you have someone who's suffering from cancer or chronic pain, this is a really good alternative. And on a personal standpoint, I don't think that we should be sending our sick into the black market and behind the shadows to purchase something, because they already are. And I know my opponent had alluded to something similar to that, but I think it's only right that we go ahead and begin to pass this and accept it. On recreational, I'm open to it. I'd like to have a little bit more research on that, and before I take a strong position on that. And I am looking into it right now.
Okay, Corey?
Yeah, I'm actually for all cannabis use across the board. And I understand James's hesitancy on recreational, because, you know, nobody really wants to smell marijuana when they're walking down the street or trying to explain it to their child what that smell is. So I do understand that, but I would be open to maybe, you know, recreational areas for it or something like that. But that's something that needs to be discussed in committee and really researched, like James is saying. And at the end of the day, I think across the board, all the legislators truly want it. But the problem is that the opioid industry would lose $4 billion just from medical use of marijuana alone. I mean, that's a huge cut for them. So that they've really been pushing politicians in Kentucky not to legalize marijuana because of that reason. And it's not only that, but I mean, just the benefit alone to local population, you know, our local farmers can benefit from this so much. You know, that's a cash crop this county desperately needs. You know, and a lot of it's grown here, I'll be honest. But we should be looking at hemp too, and see, you really shouldn't be classifying it as marijuana. We need to be classifying it as cannabis overall, so that way we can include hemp. Because hemp doesn't have the same properties that you know, marijuana does. You know, it's used in rope making. NASA uses it for construction purposes. You can put it in concrete to strengthen house. I mean, you put it in medicine, various different types of medicine to give it strength and different properties that you need. So yeah, we need to be looking at every single aspect of it. You know, CBD oil, different things like that. It has so much use for Lyme disease. You can mix marijuana and silver, and it helps patients with Lyme disease counter that. I mean, it's just like James was saying, you know, people with seizures and stuff like that. When you watch those videos, they're heartbreaking, you know, and you have so much compassion for them. You wonder, why in the heck is this not legal yet? Because if you want to watch a kid suffer like that and have a seizure, there's something wrong with you. Because this can affect, I mean, it's instant. As soon as they take it, they're well again. So thank you.
James, you wanted to, again?
Yes, even though I'm looking into my stance on the recreational portion, I do think that we need to criminalize it. You know, we're filling up our jails with folks on these small charges.
Very quickly.
Yeah, I 100% agree with James on decriminalizing marijuana across the board, because by May of 2019, Kentucky jails will be completely full. You know, that's a huge burden on our society. It's not only that, but we have mass incarceration in this state. You know, and we have to overhaul our complete justice system. I mean, there's not a lot that works with it. And it's not just that. I don't mean to just attack the justice system, but there's a lot that we're like I said, we're misusing funds. We're holding people without trial, because a lot of our jails are run by corporations now, and they're getting paid to keep people in jail, not releasing them. They're paid per head by the state to keep them in. Thank you.
James?
I'd like to clarify that a little bit more in terms of decriminalize it. You know, small users, things of that nature. Large pushers, though, people who come in with the illegal activity, I would support, you know, laws to keep it criminalized in that arena.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, we got to start tackling our large-scale dealers,
Yes.
except in marijuana, as long as it's locally grown, I think. But that all needs to be done by a state agency control. You know, that needs to be put to the agriculture board and let them do that. But I would be up for decriminalizing all drugs, because I want to actually fix the problem of why people are in jails. You know, our jail systems cost us a lot of money, and it's a lot cheaper to put people in rehab, the correct rehab, and that's the problem. We don't always put people in the correct rehab. Somebody on heroin doesn't need to go to a cocaine rehab center. That's not going to help them at all. Well, that's what we need to fix in this state. We got to fix the problem of why people are getting in there, fix the socioeconomic issues. You know, and then on these larger dealers for cocaine and heroin, start going after them real hard and heavy. Because on heroin, it's typically users that are at the lower level pushing, because they're trying to get that next fix. And we shouldn't be criminalizing them. We need to be focusing on the larger dealers that are bringing it in from Mexico and different places like that. That's the ones we got to target. Thank
Okay,
you.
we need to move on, because we're probably at our last question, and then we'll be going to the closing statements, which is going to take, theoretically anyway, 6 minutes of the time that we have left. So let's go to Randy, who is still with us. Hadn't heard from him before.
Okay. All right. Should Kentucky have a statewide fairness law to protect gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender persons from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations? And should such a law include First Amendment protections based on religious conscience? And James, if you would go first on this.
Well, I support equality for everyone, pure and simple, you know, and that's what I do. I think everyone needs to be treated fair, regardless of who they are, what they, how they identify themselves. And, you know, I'm against racism or any type of segregation of any way, pure and simple.
Okay, Corey?
Yeah, I think James and I are 100% on agreement on this issue. You know, it's not just that, but in Kentucky, you're allowed to legally discriminate LGBTQ on housing protection. They're starting to get protection at the national level, recognition, but that is something we really need to tackle here in Kentucky. Because as an engineer, when I design a company, they're looking for high-speed internet. They're looking for states that do not have at will. They're looking for infrastructure in place for affordable housing. But they're also looking for LGBT rights. And they, you know, if you don't have all that, you're not going to be bringing in big headquarter buildings for engineers like me to come in and design for you. Because there's nothing there. You know, why are they going to bring in, you know, an LGBTQ person from California and New York that's making $500,000 a year and move them to Kentucky where they could lose their job or get kicked out of their house for being LGBTQ? That's not right. And under Section 1 of the Bill of Rights of the Kentucky Constitution, it protects them. You know, we have got to start reading our own laws in this state. That's what the problem is. Everybody's wanting to just ignore them and just say, well, we can get around that. That's not the case. Our founding fathers have rules for a reason. We need to honor them. That's what we got to get back to in this country. And hopefully James would agree with me on that, but thank you.
Okay, well, I think it is time for us to go to our round of closing statements. And as we mentioned at the opening, we'll reverse the order from the opening statements, and that means Corey will be taking his closing statement first.
Well, you know, I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight and listening to us debate. I wish it was a little bit longer. I think we could have gotten some really neat issues there, but that's okay. But no, you know, overall, I think we need to start looking at new revenue types, or new revenue sources in the state, because there is tons of stuff that we could be doing. You know, we could be creating new infrastructure projects. We could be creating renewable energy sources that way. Because, you know, I had an 85-year-old woman break down crying in my arms 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, because she couldn't afford her insulin, or insulin test strips. With Medicare, it was $50 over the pharmacy, and then over the counter it was $25. She still couldn't afford it. Her 10-year-old grandson had to drive her to Walmart to buy the test strips because she was hospitalized for diabetes, and she got so bad that she couldn't drive anymore. And she was the sole provider for her grandson. And I drove him home that evening, but you know, that really stuck with me, that we are failing our society. You know, there's a woman who's struggling to get by, can't afford heat for her own house, has a 10-year-old grandson that she's trying to take care of, and she's trying to decide whether to feed him or buy her medicine. Sorry, it just breaks my heart, because there's no reason for it. Sorry, I'm getting a little torn up here, but you know, that she's not the only woman or only person in this county like that, though. You know, I've ran into so many people on the colder months since I've been running for office that have just said that, you know, I can't afford to turn on my electric heat. And, you know, the state will give me an electric heater, but it doesn't do me any good because I can't pay the $500 to $600 electric bill to run it, because they're on a fixed income. You know, if we had renewable energy sources to lower people's, you know, electric bill. I mean, at a certain point, I'd like to get rid of electric bills altogether and just have a tax at the end of the year that you pay, to where, you know, everybody has free electricity. In Portugal has their entire country, I think it's 97% run on renewable energy sources. The other 3% uses diesel at peak hours. And there are other countries around the world that do run 100% solar power or 100% electric. Renewable sources. And there's no reason why we can't. You know, we need to be creating new industries that drive vocational schools. One of the things I want to do is do away with AP and honors courses and just have dual credit courses, because I want to lower the cost of education overall. Can you imagine your kid coming out of high school with 3 or 4 years already completed for their bachelor degree? That's $60,000 to $90,000 worth of savings right there per student. Thank you.
All right, the closing statement from Corey Miller, and now over to James Weeks.
Well, thank you, Nelson County, for your time tonight to talk about our issues in Frankfort, Kentucky, and our good county in Nelson County. As your state representative, I will stand with working families, and together we will make government work for working families. I will stand up for the paychecks of working families. I will stand up for affordable health care. I will stand up for public education and our educators. I will stand up for public workers and all workers. I'll stand up for solutions to our growing epidemic, the drug epidemic. And I'll stand up for tax reform that helps working families and not hurts them. I'll stand up for transparency, which didn't happen the past 2 sessions in the legislature. I'll stand up to Matt Bevin and his buddies, and I'll stand up for you. As your state representative, I look forward to working with you, and together we will make government work for working families. I respectfully ask for your vote, May 22nd. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, and thanks to both of our candidates. Again, this is for the 50th District State Representative, Democratic primary. Corey Miller, James Louise. And our thanks to our panel here this evening. We'll be coming back here in about 15 minutes. We do have another debate scheduled, and that's going to be the Democratic candidates running for Nelson County Jailer. And that will be starting, as we said, in about 15 minutes. Special thanks to Wilson and Bank and Trust who are making the coverage here this evening possible. So Randy and Forrest and I will be back, so stay tuned.